The day Leo Vance got engaged to the Shu family heiress from Harbor City, he had his secretary deliver an agreement to me. The document listed several properties and a deposit of $70 million. dollars. His secretary, a man I'd seen 100 times, asked me politely, Mr. Vance also asked if you have any other needs. If you are considering marriage, he would be happy to introduce you to some of his friends. I had been with Leo for 8 years. In all that time, I had always held my dignity too close, never asking for anything. This time, however, I just smiled and said, okay. I had no desire to say the polite, expected things like, I don't want money, I want love. Leo and I, or more accurately, our arrangement, was a straightforward relationship between a wealthy man and the woman he kept. Our story began in high school, during what should have been a much simpler time. In my sophomore year, both of my parents died in an accident, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of their debt. The school, in a well-meaning but humiliating gesture, had me stand on the flag-raising platform during an assembly, holding a donation box while my classmates filed past, casting all sorts of glances my way. Most of the looks were sympathetic, with only a few treating it as a spectacle for their entertainment. Some were reluctant, coming from families that were struggling almost as much as I was. Only Leo was different. When it was his turn to walk by, the boy approached me with a lazy sort of curiosity. Hey, he said, I heard you get good grades. Want to do my homework for me? 800 a pop? Leo's family was wealthy, perhaps even what you would call extremely wealthy. If it weren't for the particular fondness Chinese parents have for sending their children to regular schools to build character, I probably would never have crossed paths with a young master like him in my entire life. He was there to get a taste of normal life. Whether he actually studied was secondary. Despite this, Leo was incredibly popular. He wasn't flashy or overbearing, and he had a handsome face that drew people to him. Everyone who was anyone in our grade wanted to be his friend, which made him the complete opposite of my quiet, introverted self. Before that day on the platform, our social circles had never overlapped. Looking back, that was probably the first real conversation we'd had in 2 years of being classmates. Our sudden association was so strange that it immediately became the subject of whispers. Is Leo doing that because he feels sorry for Clara Bell but doesn't want to hurt her pride? Someone would ask. I think so, another would reply. Why would a guy like Leo need someone to do his homework? Others were more cynical. Maybe the young master is just feeling charitable and is having a bit of fun with his generosity. I ignored it all. I sat at my desk, quietly imitating Leo's handwriting, copying his assignments with painstaking care. Pity or charity, it didn't matter to me. I desperately needed the money, and Leo was genuinely generous. After I gave him the copied homework, he wouldn't just dismiss it. He'd hold it up to the light, examining it carefully. If he was in a good mood, he'd offer a compliment. Not bad, but you don't have to copy my handwriting next time. I think yours is fine, little genius. Let's keep this going. Then, without any fuss, he'd transfer the money to me instantly. That 100 yuan note felt so light in my hand, but it meant so much. Over those months, I copied his homework 32 times, and he paid me 3,200 yuan in return. To him, as others pointed out, it was just pocket money. For me, it was an extra meal at the cafeteria or another textbook I needed. For that, I was incredibly grateful to him. For students whose lives revolved around studying, gossip was the best form of entertainment. My arrangement with Leo went on for so long that eventually the narrative changed. People no longer said he was doing it out of sympathy. The whispers turned into speculation about romance. I bet Leo likes Clara, someone would say. I think so too. There's definitely something going on between them. The rumors spread like wildfire through our grade. Some said he'd had a crush on me for years, while others claimed my distant attitude was just a strategy to keep him interested. I wasn't oblivious to any of it. If you asked me how I felt about Leo, I wouldn't have called it love, but there was certainly a deep affection there. At 17, who could remain indifferent to a kind, gentle boy who treated you with such consideration? I wasn't a fool. I could see his intentions, and I appreciated his thoughtfulness, but I never dared to act on it. One night during summer vacation, I finished my part-time job so late that the last bus had already left. I couldn't afford a taxi, so I started the long walk home. My phone buzzed with a message from Leo. "What are you up to?" he asked. Before I could type a reply, he sent a photo. He was on vacation in the Maldives. In the picture, the young man stood on a beach with crystal clear water, his smile so free and bold, as if he didn't have a single care in the world. He texted again, teasing, "Am I handsome?" I smiled to myself and was about to reply when my foot kicked a stray soda can. The clattering sound echoed through the quiet, dilapidated alley, snapping me back to reality. I stopped walking and stood perfectly still. I looked up at the dim, flickering streetlight, worn out from years of neglect, and then down at the bright sun and perfect beach on my phone screen. In that moment, all the recent gossip came rushing back. Why would Leo like Clara? She's not even that pretty. Maybe guys just like her hard to get act. Even if they did get together, it wouldn't last. Their worlds are too different. I couldn't help but let out a small, self-deprecating laugh. But before I could even begin to worry about it, and long before our final year of high school, Leo's family sent him abroad to study. I ended up getting into a university in another city. I thought that was the end of my story with Leo Vance. I never imagined that our next meeting would happen during the most humiliating moment of my life. It was 8 years ago. I had just graduated from college and was working as an intern at a construction company. A terrible accident happened at one of our project sites. A worker was crushed to death during construction. The investigation started from the top, and as the blame was passed down from one level to the next, it somehow landed squarely on me, the powerless intern. I had nowhere to turn, no one to plead my case to. The company even sent a manager to console me. "Clara, your signature is on the document, so it's your responsibility," he said with false sympathy. "Besides, you're still young. A couple of years in jail is no big deal. You can make a comeback afterwards. Don't worry, your position will be waiting for you when you get out." At the time, I was just a fresh graduate with no connections and no status. I was alone in the capital city with only 2,000 yuan to my name, saved from odd jobs in college. I spent it all consulting a lawyer and trying to negotiate compensation, but it was hopeless. With nowhere else to go, I ended up living under a roadside bridge for 3 days. I was truly desperate. On the fourth day, a convoy of luxury cars suddenly pulled up in front of me. Several men in expensive suits got out. Among them was the same senior manager who, just days before, had been shouting at me, "I'll make sure you go to jail." The moment he saw me, he started bowing and apologizing profusely. I was stunned by the scene. That's when Leo appeared. He stepped out of a car so expensive I couldn't even name it. He walked over and helped me up from the ground, then bent down to gently brush the dust off my pants. He didn't say a word through the whole thing. He just carefully tidied my messy clothes and hair, patiently listened to the manager's stammered explanations, and with just a few quiet words, effortlessly resolved the crisis that had ruined my life. I listened in silence, unable to stop myself from glancing at the man beside me. He was so different from the boy I remembered. The flamboyant youth in a school uniform had grown into a tall, composed man who radiated an intimidating aura of power. When his cool fingers lifted my chin, his dark eyes held a scrutinizing look that I couldn't decipher. After all these years, I've forgotten many of the details of how that problem was solved, but I will never forget the question he asked me that day. He said, "Clara, I need a beautiful companion. Are you interested?" Then, with a hint of gentle amusement, he added, "Also, remember not to fall in love with me." I stayed by Leo's side for 8 years. Some said his warning was a genuine piece of advice, while others dismissed it as a joke. But in the time it took for Leo to take over his family's business and eventually become a major player in the northern city, people came and went, but I remained the one constant presence by his side. Because of this, people were often inclined to offer their best wishes and romantic interpretations. "Leo must really love you," they'd say. "He's definitely completely smitten with you." These were blessings, and blessings are meant to be shared, so I would often tease Leo with these comments. When he was in a good mood, he didn't mind. He would even play along, reciting lines from the domineering CEO dramas I liked to watch, saying things like, "I'll spoil you if I want to." The young women in the office would sometimes overhear this and hide in the break room, chattering excitedly. They'd talk about how envious they were, which would inevitably turn into complaints about their own boyfriends, who lacked money, looks, and any sense of romance. A few of the bolder ones even asked me for advice on how I interacted with Leo to make him love me so much. Hearing this always took me aback, and I could only offer a helpless smile and say nothing, because the truth was that Leo wasn't as easygoing as he appeared to the outside world. About 3 months after he brought me to his villa, he suddenly told me we were going out to meet someone. I was puzzled as I sat in the car. I've always been an introvert and didn't have many friends in school. My time was split between studying and working part-time jobs to support myself, so my relationships with classmates were all fairly superficial. There was hardly anyone from my past that I would need to make a special effort to visit, especially not with Leo taking me. My confusion turned to shock when we arrived at a prison. The person he had brought me to see was the man who had tried to frame me for the construction accident. It was in that moment that I truly understood that the phrase, two different worlds, wasn't just about social status. The once arrogant project manager was not faring well in prison. He looked exhausted, with deep, dark circles under his eyes. His protruding ears, which he had once boasted would bring him wealth, had been sliced halfway off by something and were now crudely stitched together, hanging pitifully from his head. He seemed utterly terrified. Through the visitation glass, he could only babble incoherently about his sins, repeating them over and over. Before we left, I quietly asked a prison guard what had happened to him. The guard just shrugged. Oh, him? Got into a fight with another inmate and lost. Even in here, he can't stay out of trouble. Just made more work for us. At the time, I only had a vague suspicion. But as the years went on and I repeatedly accompanied Leo while he handled what he called tedious matters, I finally understood. For ordinary people, power and influence are an insurmountable chasm. A single casual remark from someone like Leo could ruin a person financially and destroy their family. A simple glance was enough to make people fall over themselves to serve him. Once he tried to take my hand right after he had gotten blood on his, and I instinctively pulled away. He paused, looking down at me with an expressionless face. Scared? He asked. I was still young then. The most dramatic things that had ever happened to me were my parents' deaths and being framed for a crime I didn't commit. It was impossible not to be scared. But on that day, my mind was unusually clear. I don't know if I was just scared into a state of shock or if I became calmer under pressure, but I suppressed my nausea, shook my head, and took a tissue from my bag. I carefully wiped his hands clean, saying simply, I just don't like the smell of blood. Looking back, that was probably the best decision I ever made. Without Leo, the person languishing in prison might have been me. That night, Leo was particularly rough in bed. After our first time, he had almost always been gentle, rarely showing such raw outbursts of emotion. He kept me awake until the sky outside began to lighten, and for a moment I couldn't tell if it was dawn or dusk. Afterwards, he was away on business for 3 months. During that time, he had someone send me countless gifts, an unlimited supplementary credit card, limited edition handbags, and jewelry so expensive I couldn't even pronounce the names, all sparkling with a brilliance I'd only ever seen online. I didn't refuse them. Leo didn't like it when I refused him. But I didn't accept them either. I simply placed everything in the collection room he had prepared for me, keeping them safely stored away. I was too young back then, still clinging to the last shreds of my pride. I overestimated myself and my understanding of the world. Everyone used to tell me, Leo treats you so well, how could he not like you? I've never seen him act this way with anyone else, Clara. You can rest easy. They'd dismiss his early warning not to fall for him as a joke. When you're lost in a fog, you can't see the road ahead. When you hear something often enough, you start to believe it, at least a little. And in my 20s, I genuinely did have feelings for Leo. Leo's initial proposition was that he needed a beautiful female companion. I thought my role would be that of a facade, a display piece for public events, the classic canary in a gilded cage. But in reality, our relationship was more of an unconventional partnership. He wasn't a typical keeper. He never interfered with my freedom or restricted my actions. Instead, he seemed to take pleasure in guiding and mentoring me. At the very beginning, he had me start as his personal assistant. The task seemed simple enough: pouring tea, fetching water, tying his ties, ordering meals, driving, and attending social events. I've always been good with my hands and had lived alone for a long time, so I thought these things would be easy. But in practice, they were far from effortless. When things involve the complexities of society and human relationships, everything becomes nuanced. The timing of when to deliver a glass of water, the specific taste preferences for meal orders, even the correct way to address people and the right tone of voice, it all became a specialized field of knowledge that I had to learn through trial and error, which led to quite a few setbacks. Later, after I had mastered those duties, I became his exclusive assistant. My responsibilities grew to include handling simple documents and reporting on company situations and various project collaborations. This was more professional work, which required me to spend my nights cramming knowledge that was never taught in school. In the early years, when his position in the company wasn't yet secure, Leo didn't trust anyone. He seemed to enjoy dumping countless tasks on me just to watch me frown in frustration. After enduring this for a long time, I developed a bit of a temper myself. I remember one time slamming a stack of files on his desk and shouting, "Leo, this is your company, not mine." He just smiled, not getting angry at all. He patted my back as if he were soothing a pet and made empty promises. "Once this project is finished, we'll go on a long vacation and take a good break for a few months." But the work was never truly finished. During one of those supposed vacations, a single phone call would have us exchanging a look of resignation before heading back to the office to continue working non-stop. As I became more established in my role and Leo secured his position, those frantic moments became rarer. But I could never forget the feeling of straightening his tie for him right after we'd landed from a long overnight flight, just before he had to rush into a meeting. Whenever he introduced me to others, he always used the same graceful phrase: "This is my girlfriend Clara, and also my assistant." Yes, Leo never hesitated to acknowledge my identity publicly, just as he never hesitated in his treatment of me. He was always gentle and endlessly patient. In many ways, we were like any other ordinary couple. He would go shopping with me, eat cheap, spicy snacks with me, and watch silly online dramas together. We went rock climbing, fishing, and attended crowded concerts. I knew exactly how busy he was. For years, I was the one who managed his itinerary. Yet he always seemed to find time to be a part of my life. Even if he was flying all over the world, he would arrange a layover in our city just to see me, to check if I had lost weight and remind me to eat more. For a man like Leo, money could solve almost any problem. But when it came to me, he preferred to handle things personally. He never hid our relationship. Those subtle, silent acts of care were impossible to ignore or remain indifferent to, especially when you considered the respect and kindness this same smiling boy had shown me when I was 17 and at my lowest point. Falling in love with Leo was, for me, all too effortless. Looking back now, I realize he must have known this would happen, which is why he gave me that warning when we first reunited. "Don't fall in love with me." It was just me deceiving myself, getting lost in the words of others. Fortunately, I realized the truth before it was too late. Just as I was about to confess my feelings to him, a young woman suddenly approached me. She told me she was pregnant with Leo's child. Her name was Isla Ford, and she had met Leo at a party about 6 months earlier. From the very beginning, when Leo first asked me to be his companion, I understood the nature of our arrangement. I knew I was his kept woman and that I shouldn't expect anything more. I wasn't naive. I knew that many men and women had tried to get close to Leo over the years. I had even handled situations like this Isla for him in the past, when I accompanied him to social events where women were deliberately thrown his way. He always refused them, and it seemed to give me a certain status in the eyes of others. Everyone was envious. I never flattered myself into thinking he did it because he was worried about my feelings. The truth was, Leo was just genuinely too busy. Back then, a common scene was him leaning against the sofa by the floor-to-ceiling window as the city lights came on, holding me in his arms and complaining wearily, "I really don't want to wake up tomorrow." As the years passed, my presence by his side became such a well-known fact that everyone seemed to be in on a secret they deliberately kept from me. It was as if they were afraid that if I found out about the other women, I would cause an uncontrollable dramatic scene. Miss Bell, we didn't tell you because we were afraid it would make you sad, they'd say later. But don't worry, Mr. Vance was just playing around with them. You're still the one he loves the most. Unfortunately for them, things didn't unfold as they imagined. I wasn't the one who made a scene. Isla was. She came to my office crying and begging me to let Leo give her proper status. I haven't been able to contact Leo for a long time, she sobbed. Miss Bell, you're a woman too. Please take pity on me. I just don't want my child to be born without a father who acknowledges them. Leo can refuse to acknowledge me, but the child is really his. Please help me. I'm begging you. She knelt on the floor in front of my desk and cried for a long time. The employees in the company didn't dare to openly gawk, but their constant trips to the break room turned the entire event into an inescapable spectacle. I sat on the sofa in the reception area, feeling like I was undergoing a public interrogation. One lover pleading before another is never a dignified sight. It's merely a contest of who can maintain their composure better. Thankfully, it wasn't long before Leo's men came and took Isla away. She seemed to have gotten what she wanted. She wiped her tears and walked out with a new confidence, one hand resting on her belly. That night at dinner, Leo calmly asked me, "Are you angry?" I shook my head and said, "No." He gave a soft laugh and didn't say anything more, only promising to make it up to me. A few days later, I heard that he had arranged for Isla to be admitted to the best hospital in the city, with strict instructions for her to receive attentive care. In an instant, the looks people gave me changed from sympathy to pity. I knew what they were thinking. It was just another typical drama among the wealthy, a battle for favor and power. I had no desire to explain myself, nor the energy to argue. It wasn't long before they stopped thinking that way, because Leo, in a move of shocking ruthlessness, had someone hold Isla down while a doctor performed a forced abortion on her. When I heard that she was crying and demanding to see me again, I just sat by the window and sighed. Leo had always been meticulous. If it weren't for Isla's opportunism, he would never have let anyone bear his child in the first place. The last time we spoke, Isla had told me how wonderful Leo had been to her, giving her everything she wanted, being gentle and attentive. She had never met a man like him. She also never imagined her story would end like this. After a couple more days of trying to contact me, she vanished completely. It was obvious whose doing it was. In a novel, an incident like this would be a plot point, where the male lead humiliates a rival for the sake of the female lead. As the main character, I should have been happy. But in the dead of the night, I would be startled awake by visions of Isla's face, filled with despair. She was like an alarm bell, a warning about my own future. Leo was Leo. When he liked you, he could give you all the tolerance and patience in the world, personally crafting a dream for you. But when he didn't like you anymore, you could cry until your tears ran dry, and he wouldn't spare you a second glance. I truly should never have had those expectations. All I needed to do was play my part. So when he asked me what compensation I wanted, I should have teased him with a line like, "I don't want money, I want lots and lots of your love." I met Leo when I was 17. I started following him at 22 and stayed for 8 years. Now I was 30. A woman's most precious years were all spent on him. So when his secretary sent me the separation agreement, I wasn't surprised. Rumors about his impending engagement to the heiress from Harbor City had been circulating for a month. Harbor City had certainly made a grand show of it, with headlines in major papers featuring multi-angle photographs and half-page introductions calling it a union of the century and a model of a business marriage. Leo had been planning a cross-sea tunnel project, and the groundbreaking ceremony went ahead as scheduled. That day, the media dedicated primetime coverage to a live broadcast of the grand engagement ceremony. On the television screen, Leo was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. His features were sharp, his profile handsome. He looked even taller and more composed than usual as he moved through the crowd of colorful guests, smiling and accepting their congratulations. Amidst the anticipation, he took the diamond ring and placed it on the finger of his graceful fiancée. They posed for photos. They embraced. They kissed. Everything was harmonious and perfect, a joyous occasion for all. The report concluded, and the video feed cut off. I sat quietly in my living room, watching and listening. A dull ache spread through my chest, like biting into a grape that wasn't quite ripe, leaving a lingering sourness in my mouth. Over the years, I had often wondered if Leo would ever get married. And if he did, what would he do with me? Would I be the one to wisely leave on my own, or would I wait for him to make the arrangements? It's a pity that no matter how much I thought about it, I never truly understood him. That morning, as I was tying his tie, he suddenly said to me, "Clara, I'm getting married." I hadn't expected him to be so direct. My hands paused for a moment. I lowered my gaze, thought for a second, and then managed a smile. "Congratulations," I said. He seemed reluctant to let the conversation end there. He added, "After we get married, we'll live together." This time, I reacted more quickly, joking with him. "Oh, really? So where will I live? Under your bed?" Leo could only smile helplessly. He patted me on the shoulder and told me he would arrange everything for me. Look, even after all these years, he still kept his word. The confidentiality agreement his secretary handed me was straightforward. In exchange for my silence, Leo would transfer several properties and $70 million to my name. The properties were in a prestigious area of Haicheng, a city thousands of miles away from our northern city. I had no objections and quickly reviewed the document. Seeing my compliance, the secretary asked, "Miss Bell, is there anything else you need?" Mr. Vance instructed that if you have any other requests, they can be added to the agreement. I thought for a moment and then shook my head. "No, that's all." The secretary organized the papers and guided me through signing and stamping them. Just as I was about to leave after asking him to convey my thanks to Leo, he suddenly turned back and added one more thing. "Do you have any plans to get married in the near future? Mr. Vance said that if you need, he can introduce you to a few of his friends here in the city." His words made me pause mid-step. I couldn't help but curve my lips into a self-deprecating smile. I looked down at the agreement in my hand. I knew the secretary was just relaying a message, and there was no point in making things difficult for him. So I simply smiled and replied, "All right, then please thank Mr. Vance in advance for me." I had followed Leo for 8 years, always holding my dignity so high that I never asked for anything. This time was no different. I wasn't going to say polite, meaningless words like, "I don't want money, I want love." 2 days later, I packed my things and left the northern city. The day I left, a light, cool rain was falling. The sky over the airport was vast and gray, the mist stretching all the way to the boarding bridge. It reminded me of the overpass where I had taken shelter from the rain 8 years ago. I didn't take any of the expensive gifts from the collection room, but Leo generously had them all converted into cash and deposited into my account. He arranged for someone to see me off and took care of all my arrangements in Haicheng, making my move feel more like a vacation than a permanent departure. When I first arrived, I thought I would feel out of place, but Haicheng's climate was pleasant, even more livable than the city I'd left behind. As promised, not long after I settled in, people began to contact me. They were all men Leo had arranged for me to meet. They invited me for meals and casually discussed the topic of marriage. To his credit, Leo introduced me to very suitable people. They came from good families, were excellent conversationalists, and even their parents were open-minded. Everything seemed perfect, yet as I sat across from them, my mind would always drift. I felt dazed and disconnected. Eventually, I realized I wasn't in the right state for this, so I would apologize to the man and decline any subsequent invitations. After a few of these encounters, Leo's assistant called me. "Is something wrong, Miss Bell? Are you dissatisfied with these men?" I told him no, that it was just me. "I don't have any plans to get married right now," I explained. What I didn't tell him was that I didn't want to keep seeing Leo's shadow in everyone else. I stayed at home for a few more days, and then one day, on a sudden whim, I bought a random plane ticket. That was the beginning of my journey around the world. I had plenty of time and plenty of money. I traveled through all the Nordic countries, then flew from Chile over the Drake Passage to Antarctica. I sat on the balcony of a cruise ship, gazing at the azure glaciers, and wondered what kind of life I would be living now if I had never met Leo. In prison? Released from prison and struggling to make ends meet? All I could imagine was a future shrouded in uncertainty. Later, while traveling in Melbourne, I met a girl named Jia Cheng. We ran into each other at a police station. We had both had our belongings stolen by pickpockets. Jia Qing was very talkative. Her family ran a medical equipment business back home, making her a typical rich girl who had never worried about a thing. But recently, she had been consumed with worry over the division of her family's assets. Her father, she explained, was a traditional man who had always wanted a son but never had one. As a result, he had many affairs and illegitimate children. He died suddenly in the bed of his latest lover before he could even write a will. The family was thrown into chaos. It wasn't just outsiders eyeing the inheritance. Her own uncles were circling like vultures. As her father's only legally recognized child, Jia Qing was the target of everyone's schemes. But she was barely in her 20s and knew nothing about business. All she was good at was spending money and traveling. Her mother was too kind for her own good and was easily bullied. The two of them were no match for the wolves at their door. Jia Qing had gotten injured while trying to help me get my wallet back, so I already felt a little guilty. Since I had nothing else to do, I couldn't just stand by and watch. I started giving her advice and helped her strategize. While helping her set up her own company, I was surprised by how effortlessly it all came to me. After Jia Qing had stabilized her family's business, she grabbed my hands and screamed with excitement, "Clara, you're amazing! You're way better than the professional consultants my mom hired." It was then that it dawned on me. Years ago, I was once respectfully addressed as Special Assistant Belle. I also remembered that in the beginning, I was just as clueless as Jia Qing. It was Leo who had dragged me, kicking and screaming, from being a clueless intern, honing me step by step through countless trials and challenges. From the time I was 17 until I was 30, he had always been the one lifting me up. "Leo, I should have hated you, but how could I possibly hate you after all that?" I suddenly realized that what I couldn't forget wasn't some failed romance. It was the memory of us walking hand in hand, achieving success together. That day, after seeing Jia Qing off, I cried alone for a very long time. I cried until the weather outside had cleared, until more than a year had passed since I left the northern city, until I finally dared to open the domestic news and see Leo's wedding announcement. I cried until I had finally let him go. After returning to my country, I went back to my profession. I collaborated with Jia Qing on a new project, and we laid the foundation for our own company. It felt as if I had discovered the life I was always meant to live. I relished the thrill of navigating the business world and was captivated by the patience and strategy required to wield power. I met Leo again 2 years later at a business reception held after our company was officially listed on the stock exchange. No one there would have expected that we, who were once such close partners, could now sit across from each other as equals. I had once thought that seeing him again would make me nervous or flustered, but at that moment, I found I could stand up gracefully, raise a toast to him with dignity, and even say with a genuine smile, "Mr. Vance, it's been a long time." I could face him with composure. After the banquet ended, we even discussed work. We had both taken an interest in the same project. Leo said he would yield it to me, and I gladly accepted. Afterward, Jia Qing asked me in confusion, "Why would you do that? You shouldn't show any kindness to a scumbag like him." "Clara, why did you still accept something he gave you?" I looked at her youthful face, so full of resentment. I didn't explain. I just smiled and patted her shoulder. "Jia, I'm a businesswoman. Business people value profit over personal feelings. There's no need to fight for some meaningless pride by letting emotions get in the way." Later, Leo arranged a private meeting. I didn't agree at first, but then he offered to give up 30% of the project's profits. Reluctantly, I went. The location was a Japanese restaurant with private rooms. Leo sat across from me, his eyes still exuding an air of nobility, his tone still gentle. "Clara," he said, "these past few years must have been very tough for you." Then he asked, "If I remember correctly, the money I gave you should have been more than enough for you to live a life of leisure. Why are you still working so hard?" He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on me, his brow furrowed slightly as if he genuinely couldn't understand my choices. I didn't want to explain. I simply told him, "What you consider stability and what I consider stability are not the same." In Leo's vision, my stability meant a life of enjoyment, material satisfaction, and a happy family. I knew he resented me for stepping into the spotlight instead of quietly following the path he had laid out for me. But Leo, I am no longer the 20-something Clara you once knew, Mr. Vance. After that meeting, we never saw each other again. During this time, however, his wife, the Harbor City socialite Serena Shu, came to see me once. Serena was a very gentle and graceful woman. She invited me for tea and made it clear she wasn't there to rehash the past, but simply because she wanted to meet me. I was very curious about you, she said. You know, Miss Bell, after you left, Leo dated several other girls. At first, I just thought he liked a certain type. It wasn't until later, when I saw a photo of you, that I realized they all looked like you. She spoke in a very matter-of-fact way, without any malice, as if her husband's infidelity wasn't a shocking affair. She even winked at me playfully. I think, she concluded, that Leo just couldn't bear to do it. I was puzzled. Reluctant about what? Reluctant to place you in such a position, she explained. Her words made me fall silent, but they only strengthened my resolve. Miss Shu, I said calmly, I think you might be mistaken. Why? She asked. Because when faced with his interests, money, and status, I'm not the only thing he was willing to give up. To Leo, I'm like his favorite glass of lemonade. He couldn't replace wine with lemonade at a formal dinner, and he couldn't drink lemonade for the rest of his life. As for me, in the days to come, I will strive to run toward the distant sun. The sun is both a setting sun and a rising sun. When it descends to gather the day's last light, it is simultaneously climbing the opposite peak to spread its blazing morning glow. One day, I too will quietly descend the mountain. And on that day, another girl will surely come running up from below, bringing her passion and her innocence. Of course, that won't be me, but in a way, isn't it? On the first day Clara left, Leo overslept. He rarely overslept. He had never been a good sleeper, and it was always Clara who would get up first, prepare everything for his day, and then gently wake him. Now that Clara was gone, Leo no longer had an alarm clock. The housekeeper was afraid of him and didn't dare wake him either. By the time Leo finally woke up, his eyes heavy with sleep, the morning meeting he was supposed to attend had been over for an hour. He picked up his phone, called his assistant to reschedule his day, then cleared his throat, which felt a bit tight. He instinctively called out, "Clara, could you get me a glass of water?" The words had barely left his mouth when he froze. He tugged at the corner of his lips, laughing at his own foolishness. He had forgotten. He had sent her away yesterday. Glancing at the time, he calculated that Clara had probably already arrived in Haicheng. He picked up his phone again, his thumb hovering over the number to call and check on her situation, but in the end, he put the phone down. Forget it. He raised a hand and rubbed his temples. It had to end sooner or later. Leo couldn't explain it, not even to himself. It was he who had suggested introducing Clara to potential marriage partners, but when he heard she had declined them all, why did he feel so dissatisfied? And when he heard she finally agreed to meet one, why did he feel even more upset? He looked at the files in his hand. Each man was someone he had carefully selected. Their family background, their character, they were all a good match for the Clara she was now. Even if the marriage didn't work out, she wouldn't be marrying into a family where she could be bullied. Yet he still ended up choosing men who were the most similar to himself. What was he trying to prove? What did he even want? He mentally cursed himself. He had never considered himself an indecisive person, but when it came to Clara, there was always some deviation from the plan. The day his secretary sent him photos of Clara chatting and laughing with one of those men, he sat expressionless by the window and smoked the entire night. He didn't know what he wanted to do, but he had an overwhelming urge to fly to Haicheng and ask her, "Clara, haven't you noticed? Don't you see that all these men have something in common?" He stubbed out his cigarette, feeling like he must be sick. Leo had always known he was a person with clear goals. From the moment he met Clara again, to bringing her to his side, to warning her not to fall in love, he had always been aware that he was trading something common, his money and protection, for something precious, her time and genuine affection. So when he decided to get married for business, he felt not a shred of guilt. He believed their arrangement was a mutual agreement, and for the most part, it was. So he gave her the settlement. He knew that with Clara's temperament, she would take the money and leave quietly. Even without that agreement, she would never make a scene at his wedding. She had always been a dignified woman. She had just loved the wrong person. Yes, Leo had always known Clara liked him, but so what? In the face of profit, money, and status, Clara was expendable. Even if he might regret it later, he could always find alternatives. He thought this, and he acted on it. But gradually, he realized that not everything could be under his complete control. His marriage to Serena was a business arrangement. They had an agreement before the wedding, they would each live their own lives. He wasn't afraid of Serena finding out about his affairs. As long as they maintained a dignified front in public, they were the perfect couple. Yet he was terrified of Clara finding out. It felt like a strange mix of concealment and shame. When he learned that Serena had gone to see Clara, he flew into a rage, saying harsh things to his wife without thinking. In the end, exhausted, he wiped his face and said, "I'm sorry, I was too emotional. Is there anything you want? I can make it up to you." Serena merely gave him a cold look and said with sarcasm, "Leo, do you think I'm one of your little flings? That a few gifts can smooth everything over?" Her words made him feel even more ashamed and reminded him of his last unpleasant meeting with Clara. At that time, Leo had been drinking. He stood in the wind, watching Clara's car drive away, and suddenly it felt like he was back in the first year they were together. Back then, Clara was curious about everything. She loved cats and dogs, and she loved dragging him outside in the middle of winter just to admire the city's fireworks. He had worn too little and was shivering in the cold, but he still held her in his arms, shielding her from the snow. "Do you like them that much?" he had asked with amusement. "If you like them so much, when we have some free time, we'll go to Harbor City. I'll set off a private fireworks display just for you at Victoria Harbor." "Okay, really?" she had replied, her eyes wide. Did they ever set off those fireworks? He didn't think so. They had both been too busy. And later, when they finally did have free time, he had forgotten his long overdue promise. On the day she left the restaurant, he did ask her, "Do you want to come back?" "Back where?" she'd asked. "By my side." She didn't say yes or no. She just looked at him with a small smile and said, "Leo, I don't want to hate you." Asking her was supposed to be a symbolic gesture. Even if she had disagreed, he had planned to force her to return to him. He genuinely disliked the woman she had become. She felt unfamiliar, like something had slipped beyond his control. They had once been so intimately close. She was the rose he had personally nurtured. He loved seeing her radiant and dazzling on a stage, yet he also wanted to hide her away where no one else could see. But Clara, she knew him too well. She knew his filthy thoughts, his despicable soul, and she knew exactly how to make him back down. So, he let her fly free. From the very beginning, what had attracted him was her straight back as she stood in the sunlight, her soul that would never yield. They had grown up together, supported each other. He had exchanged his wealth for her time and her sincere love. And then, in the struggle of human nature, he had lost that genuine heart. So later, when Leo learned that Clara had married a young entrepreneur and that on their wedding day, the man had set off a sky full of fireworks for her in Haicheng, nobody knew that on that very same night, a brilliant fireworks display was also held over Victoria Harbor in Hong Kong. Leo knew that Clara's love and hatred were both too pure. She couldn't bring herself to hate him, even though hatred often lasts longer than love. He stood at the harbor, facing the evening breeze, listening to the soft chatter of tourists behind him, wondering, who grants you a fleeting moment of heaven on earth? Who walks with you through the sea of love and hate, and in this vast sea, where was the heaven on earth for him?